Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and I've probably said this more than once, that I could spend my whole life studying the book of Genesis because it is so fascinating, and it never ends. And every time I study it, I learn something new. And that's the goal today with my guest, Pastor Jonathan Bourman is going to be joining me. He is the senior pastor at St. Mark in Mankato. You can learn more about him at stmarkmankato.com. Jonathan, nice to have you on.
It's really great to be back, Bill. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I get the feeling you're a big lover of Genesis yourself.
I just, this summer we're doing another sermon series here on the book of Genesis. We've been doing that summers, and man, I've enjoyed it. It has been very, very rich.
It'll be great in eternity to spend all of eternity enjoying God's Word.
Yes, it will.
And then
yes,
some. Yeah. So let's talk about Genesis chapter 33 today. I love this encounter where Jacob meets Esau.
There's so much richness for us here. So I'm a pastor and also preacher. I get to preach every week here at St. Mark. And I had this opportunity a few weeks ago to actually hear somebody else preach, which was really, it was really edifying and constructive. But it just so happened that preacher was also preaching on Genesis. He made the comment opening up his sermon on Genesis to say that these people's lives can seem so far away. And I like hearing stuff like that when, for me, that moment and that comment from that pastor was actually, it was a challenge to me because my experience of Genesis is actually very different from his. My experience of Genesis is that these ancient people don't seem far away really at all. My experience of Genesis is a very thin door. And what I mean by that is that when I bump into, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 33 here, I bump into it with stories in my head. Like I read this pundit who was commenting on one of the saddest cultural stories of 2024 in the United States of America. And so there's a lot of sad stories out there. This was just this pundit's opinion. But what the pundit was talking about was a national story that came out about a big trend in 2024 where adult children are enacting on their parents something called no contact, which is really just a euphemism for an adult child purposefully estranging themselves from their own parents. So this is one of the major trends in America today, where families are being busted up purposefully and the culture is cheering them on. And so that's just one story. Here we have a story where we enter into a world of reconciliation. Jacob had been estranged, his own fault, from his twin brother. And so we get to enter that world, a world where there can be estrangements, hurts, and deep harms in a relationship. And these people come back together. So that's just a little introduction to the story.
That's fascinating, Jonathan. All right. So in Genesis 33, we have an encounter that is incredibly fascinating. Would you like to read part of the text, or how would you like to do this?
Yeah, I think reading part of it would be really good. Let me just open up by reading, or would you like to read it, Bill, verses 1 through 4?
Okay.
1 through 4.
I'd be happy to do that. Usually I charge for this, but I'm going to just comp you today.
All right.
Does that
Sounds
work?
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
Then Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids. He put the maids and their children in front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. But he himself passed on ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept.
Incredible little scene here.
Oh, is that ever?
For a couple of reasons. Like, first of all, I think it's good for our listeners to remember that this would have been very, very, very tense, especially for Jacob. Jacob had no idea what was going to be going on with Esau. He's thinking that he's coming with guys, 400 guys, which would have been the size of basically what we know to be a military regiment of that time. So you got to think, like, this is 400 guys with guns.
Yeah.
And he had really hurt his brother. His brother, last he heard, wanted to kill him.
Yeah. I'm shaking in my sandals.
I mean, yeah. So what ends up happening, Jacob has this very, very carefully worked out plan. And as his brother's approaching, you can see that Jacob is actually very servile, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
He treats his brother like his brother's a prince. We're going to see that in his language later. But Esau is in a completely different place. Actually, verse 4 is really, really helpful. We can notice, first of all, the subject of all the verbs, except for the last one, is only Esau. So Esau runs to meet Jacob, the text says. Esau embraces Jacob. So those are 2 different verbs. Then we get a third verb. He throws his arms around Jacob's neck. This is a very manly man, right? Like, this is an outdoorsy guy, and he's kissing him. Now, just to push on this a little bit, some of our listeners are actually going to recognize that scene from another part of the Bible. That is almost an identical scene with a story that Jesus tells called the prodigal son. And many commentators, and I'm one of them, actually believe that Jesus uses, this is such a beautiful scene, that Jesus actually uses Esau as a model for the father in that story called the prodigal son, this beautiful, beautiful moment of reconciliation. Esau is really doing all of it. And then the last verb, Bill, the last verb is so beautiful because now all of a sudden you get this subject that's plural. They wept. So both of the brothers then, after all those decades of estrangement, come together, and there is reconciliation. A beautiful, beautiful moment in the Bible.
Yeah, it really is. Or Jacob is approaching him, and Esau has this massive army, and he's taking a fairly significant risk, I would say.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Now, here's where I think this, to make this real personal to our listeners, I think this is actually a moment of hope, because I want to tell you why. Some people are going to go at this scene. They're going to say, here's how you do reconciliation. Here's what you can learn about reconciliation. I'm not in that place, actually. I think that Jacob actually sows the seeds of irreconciliation among his sons, and that this reconciliation is actually a gift of God. Here's why I want to show you that. Jacob does something here that is incredibly dark at the moment he's approaching his brother. What he does, and we read it in the text, is that he arranges his children from least favorite to favorite. And this is actually him sowing the seeds that we know bear fruit later in the book of Genesis. Joseph, there's antagonism and irreconciliation among the brothers that happens later. And so Jacob actually starts that here. So Jacob sows the seeds of irreconciliation while he himself receives reconciliation as a gift from God. I actually think what happens here is that God changed Esau's heart. Like it says in the book of Proverbs, in the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water. This was a gift of God that God gives for the gift of reconciliation. I think this is where it helps people who are listening to this who might be in a hurting relationship, is I think it's a moment of hope for us. There's always 99 reasons why we should let sleeping dogs lie in a relationship. There's always 99 reasons why we shouldn't try. There's always 99 reasons why it's not going to it's not going to work, right? To
Mm-hmm.
get back into a relationship with somebody. But here, Jesus actually called Jacob to this. Jesus empowered Jacob for this. You can read the rest of Genesis for that. And he brings Jacob to this point, and he gives Jacob back his brother in his arms. So I think it's a moment of hope for our listeners, Bill.
Oh, that's a beautiful moment. Jonathan Bourman is my guest. We're in Genesis 33 right now, and I'm loving this. All right. So we just concluded with verse 4. Should we keep moving?
Let's do it.
Should I do 3 verses?
Yeah, I think that'd be sufficient.
Okay. He lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maids came near with their children, and they bowed down. Leah likewise came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterwards Joseph came near with Rachel, and they bowed down.
I always I'm smiling right now and telling you that because you can't see me, but always unfortunate in life how the best moments, I wish you could just freeze them. I wish you could stay with them. Unfortunately, life does move on, and life does move on here. Jacob had already put this plan in motion. He's going to have his family come and bow down to Esau, and they are introduced. I honestly would like to see Jacob be a little bit more thought out here. I really would. I am a twin brother. I am a twin, and I am the father of twins as well. And I really wish that Jacob would have thought out and said something like, "Hey, Uncle Esau, meet Reuben." I wish he would have done something like that. But
Yeah.
he's pretty tight. He's pretty formal. He's pretty legal here. As the text reads, it's almost like he's not quite trusting the situation. I'm going to point out later that he definitely doesn't trust the situation. But there you have it. What goes on next in the dialogue, though, Bill, I think we should keep reading because I think there's some key stuff that we got to take a look at here as well.
All right. Verses 8, 9, and 10. And he said, "What do you mean by all this company which I have met?" And he said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own." Jacob said, "No, please. If now I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please take my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty." Thus he urged him, and he took it.
Yeah, Bill, there's a lot there. There's a lot there in this dialogue. And what I want to do is probably ignore most of it so that we can really get to the heart of it and take our time seriously that today.
Okay, good. Let me take a little break. We'll be right back with lots more of Genesis chapter 33. Pastor Jonathan Bourman is my guest. He is the pastor at St. Mark Mankato, stmarkmankato.com. We'll be right back. Well, I love every day opening God's Word, worshiping Him, studying His Word, and letting it speak to me. If you'd like to sign up for the Verse of the Day email, you can do that at myfaithradio.com, and you'll receive a daily scripture graphic. I encourage you to do it. I love the book of Genesis, and we're in it today with Pastor Jonathan Bourman. We're in chapter 33, Jacob meets Esau. All right, Jonathan, terrific setup to what we're going to discuss, verses that we just covered, starting in, I think it was 8 all the way down through 11. So what is our takeaway now from this chunk of verses?
Yeah, so I want to draw our listeners' attention here to really what I think is the heart of the dialogue. What you hear is the situation where Jacob had sent ahead really gifts to appease Esau, we're told in the book of Genesis. And I want to draw your attention to what Esau said about the gifts. And I want to give you one translation puts it this way, where Esau says, I already have plenty, my brother. I already have plenty, my brother. Now, just give me a little space here, and I'm trying to make some sense of why this is important for our relationships and the topic of reconciliation. So Esau says, I already have plenty. First of all, that statement all by itself is absolutely remarkable. It's a remarkable statement. Most people, I think, Bill, if most people, if you ask them, do you have enough? And if they were honest, what they would say is, no, I don't have enough. And the reason why you can prove that by your own motives. Like what are people looking for? Do they want more? Do they think they need more? And if they're feeling in their life like they don't have enough, then they're not in the place that Esau is at. Because Esau's not saying I don't quite have enough. He's also not saying that he has just enough. He is actually beyond that. He's above the level of enough, and he's actually saying I have plenty. So that's already remarkable. Now Jacob comes back for his own part, and the translations, some of the translations obscure this a little bit, but the Hebrew actually has Jacob saying in response to Esau, I have everything. That's quite a statement, isn't it, Bill?
It is.
So Jacob says, I have everything. Esau says, I've got plenty. And then Jacob comes back and one-ups him actually and says, I have everything. Like, what now? I'll pause on that for a second too, and just point out, like, only a Christian can say that. Only a Christian can be so bold as to say, I have everything. I have God. I have his son Jesus. I have the new creation coming for me. So Jacob is saying he's not only beyond Esau, who says I have plenty. Jacob is saying I have everything. But here's the point: you have two people here who are coming back into a relationship with each other, and both of them are saying I have more than I need.
Wow.
That is really, really, really significant.
Is it ever?
Because think about that for relationships. If God had gifted them. First of all, there's enough for everybody in the world. We find that out. God has enough for all of us. But here's two men who are realizing that, so that when they come to a relationship with each other, they are not actually looking to get anything from each other. They are able to be there only to be there and get a relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So significant, Bill.
Yes. So good.
So this is what you have here. This is a moment of faith. A lot of times people want to read these texts and here's what we want to do. We want to read lessons. We want to figure out how we can work it so that we can get in a relationship with each other. And to be honest, Bill, there's things we can learn in that direction here. Like Esau definitely is a model of forgiveness here. If we want to be in relationships with each other, forgiveness is the basis of everything. We have to let things go and give it to God. And Esau lets it all go. He doesn't name any of the trickery and deceit.
Wow.
None of it. He just, think about that. He just lets it all go. Jacob, for his part, he comes in with so much humility. He doesn't say it directly, but everything in his posture, everything in his words is implying to to Esau, I am very, very sorry for what I did. I never should have done it. And then this is a great thing for us to consider too, that even if we're only 4% wrong in a relationship, we're still 4% wrong, and we can apologize for that and make no claim on the other person. Both of these men are doing that here. But at the heart and the heart of the core of it, these are two men who are not looking to get something from each other. They are honestly there for each other.
That's pretty significant, Jonathan Bourman. I really like this point a lot. You've done a beautiful job so far. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I know there's more.
Yeah, I'll say this. I've been trying to center a lot of my comments on God. God is the one who gave these men enough. God is the one who brought these men back together. I want to make one final comment about God's grace that I think you can see in this story. What ends up happening is actually rather tragic. Jacob deceives Esau again, actually. Jacob says, I'm going to go, he promises, says to him, I'll go down with you to Seir. And he doesn't. The text actually says that he goes, while Esau goes south to Seir, he goes directly north to Succoth, and he settles there. He actually goes the other direction from his brother. And it's a sobering moment. When I preach this in the church, I could just feel like it's so disappointing to see God's people be deceptive and to sin like that. But it's amazing to remember then that God still loved this man. He still loved this man, Jacob, who is a deceiver. That's what his name means.
Mm-hmm.
And he still gave him grace. And even though he knew that he was going to do this to his brother again, he still put his brother back in his arms. It's a moment of grace. And when we see moments like this in the Bible, it has to remind us of Jesus Christ, that we really are saved by grace alone, not because we have so much weakness in us, we do slip back into sin. But Jesus forgives us and loves us. It's exactly why he lost reconciliation with his Father on the cross to reconcile us to the Father through him. So praise be to him for that, Bill.
Yeah. So in conclusion, and we just have 30 seconds left, Jonathan, is it safe to say that family relationships can be complicated?
It's very safe to say that.
All right. Thank you for being with us today. It's been great teaching, and it's just nice to hear your voice.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Pastor Jonathan Bourman has been my guest. You can learn more about him at stmarkmankato.com. We're going to take a little break and then come back with a brand new segment, Untested, Untried, called Sports Chat with Ryan, George, and Wyatt. That's all next.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. Yeah. What's for dinner? Hey. It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
Welcome to the show. It is now time for a brand new segment. Right now, it's going to be called the Unnamed Sports Talk. Our top story tonight is we don't have a name. Now let's talk sports. My guests today are George P. Fraser, Ryan Mitchell, and Wyatt Morrell. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
I know.
I didn't know Wyatt's last name. I didn't know he had one.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah, believe it or not, I do have a last name.
Okay.
Unscripted, unrehearsed. Here we go. So there's so many people interested in sports, and I think you guys know sports better. All three of you know sports better than anybody I know. So let's gather and talk. One of the things I wanted to bring up is in 2024, 68 million Americans were expected to wager over $23 billion on the Super Bowl. Oh, so it should come as no surprise because $120 billion were bet on sports in 2023. It's coming to every door. So how should Christians respond?
George, go ahead. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on
You're
this.
a former gambler, George.
I was a gambler.
Yeah.
All things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. It's when you're watching the football game and you have money on the game, it's like you're on the team. It adds the excitement, the dopamine. You're really into it. The problem is people can get carried away. I know I did. And you see the warnings all the time when they have the advertisements for the betting apps, 1-800-GAMBLING. Well, they wouldn't have to do that if it wasn't a problem. I think it's a lot like drinking. I don't drink anymore, but I think it's permissible for people. But a lot of people are going to have a problem with it.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, the word you use there, dopamine, I think that's the key with anything, whether it's sports gambling or another issue that you can get addicted to, let's say, George. It's never enough. You're going to keep chasing after it, right? That's kind of the issue. You win some money, let's say, when's it going to be enough at some point? It never is.
I think you gamble till you lose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it's really exciting, which is strange. But if you could put $50 on the Vikings game and walk away, I think you're fine. But for a lot of people, they're not able to do that. And that's where the problem comes in. And it's going to break up families. People are going to lose jobs. They're going to embezzle, probably go to prison. It takes control of you, just like alcohol does to some people. And yeah, it is exciting. If you go home and watch the Vikings this weekend and you have $100 on the game, you're going to be more into it than if you're not going to be flipping the channels.
Right. Well, and me and Ryan were having this conversation before we actually hopped on. And okay, let's define what gambling is then. Does fantasy football count in that? Does, I mean, going to the horse track and doing that with horse racing? I mean, where do you draw the line when it comes to gambling? Because I know many people, and I'm just as guilty as this as anybody, who might put $10 down, let's say, on a fantasy football league or something else. And I think people all view it in different ways.
So for you, that's entertainment. So and that's where it starts for a lot of people. I always think whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, you like it a little too much, and that's the real red flag. Are you not doing other things so you can do this? Are you spending extra time reviewing all the statistical analysis of the upcoming game? Are you scanning the injury reports? And not just for fun. Is it taking up a lot of your time? Is it taking time away from your family? How about at work? Are you doing it at work? And I think there's little checks like that I would look at.
Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, what are you sacrificing, I think, is a great question. And then all of this, the underlining question to me is, what's your heart posture? And you can tell other people, guess what? That's between me and God. Only he and I know that. But, George, you talk about it so often on another program here on Faith Radio, Real Recovery, about people holding you accountable and people telling you, hey, I want to make sure I check you on this. And like you said, something may start off as entertainment, but it quickly can escalate to something so much more than that. And the numbers you mentioned, Bill, it's saying the quote-unquote big game, because we don't say the actual term because the NFL's trademarked and all that stuff. I want to make the big game even bigger. So then when I'm sitting there with my buddies, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care about the Chiefs. I don't care about the 49ers, but I'm going to be a little more interested if I throw a little parlay over here, or if this guy can rush for this many yards, whatever it is, I'm going to be more dialed in. It's never enough, like you said, George.
Well, you can even bet on the over-under on the length of the national anthem.
I know. There's prop bets for everything.
It's everything, yeah.
Baseball, ball or strike.
Huh. Did not know that.
And then they have this. I saw this. I was watching a game the other night. You can try to pick who scores the first touchdown.
Yep.
But if you're wrong, they'll refund your money to bet again.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how do you not like that?
Yeah.
And I'm even thinking, I think I could do that. The problem is you get hooked, and you really have to watch it. And I don't know. I think fantasy football and all those things are great, baseball, but you have to be aware that it could be costly for you.
Mm-hmm. I recognize some of these voices, but I'm not sure what they're talking about. This is a brand new segment I call the Unnamed Sports Talk. We're going to probably give it a name. This is going to be, I think, a lot of fun, and there's so many people that love sports, and they love to hear stories of athletes that are living for Christ, and there are certain topics that we are going to discuss that I think have interest across the board. So do you guys want to return to more talk on gambling? Because I got another topic if you want to move ahead.
Yeah, I think we should move on. It's starting to trigger me a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe we should go. What do you think?
Yeah, let's move on. The last thing I would just say about it is if you find yourself having to justify your action, like with anything, and you're justifying why you're doing something, that's probably the time to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, why am I having to justify this? Maybe there's something wrong with this. And remember, we'd be an outlier. I mean, so many people are on board with gambling and other things these days that we're kind of the outliers if you don't do it. And God calls us to be of Him. We're not to be of the world. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. And we are still committed to Him and the cross. So,
Wyatt, I appreciated what you said about recreation, because I think there is a difference between recreation and gambling. I went to the horse track, 10 years ago, and I was able to bet $3. Now, was I betting? Well, I was technically. I felt a little creepy going up, putting in my bet, but it was entertainment. It was $3.
yeah.
So
Get the cigar, the sunglasses, and the hat.
That little hat on, yeah.
Yeah.
But it does kind of make it a little bit more fun to watch, the races.
Well, I think what we're talking about is entertainment. And you have an entertainment budget like most people do.
Mm-hmm.
Playing golf, that. I never bet at golf because I had it drilled into me by my dad that we play for $1 front, $1 back, $1 overall. Because really you don't want to take money from your friends, and you certainly don't want them taking it from you. And the game, I think if you get a few hundred going there, it's not a game, it's a war. Mm-hmm. And if you lose, you got feelings.
No.
Like I'd run to the parking lot and get out of there before I paid somebody.
Yeah.
But I think, you know what you say, I'm in the world, but I'm not of it.
No. Well, one thing we didn't talk about either, and I don't remember the exact scripture right now, it's kind of escaping me, but it's very clear. God says, do not cause a brother to stumble and sin. So it's one thing to have a heart-to-heart with yourself and God about this issue and ask yourself if you should be doing this. But if you know somebody who's been doing this or has an issue with this, just like with anything, you mentioned drinking before, George, it can be another source of addiction that somebody may have. If you are putting them in a position to potentially stumble back into that, well, the Bible's very clear about that and making sure you don't cause another brother or believer to sin.
That's a great point.
It's a great point, yeah. You're listening to the Unnamed Sports Talk. This is our first segment we've done. So let me ask you, George, and my guests are Wyatt, Ryan, and George. And George and I, you are from a certain generation. Wyatt and Ryan are from a different generation. But when we were growing up, George, we didn't play sports on Sundays. There were no games or practices. That was a day that it was designated for families, and there were no sports activities. Now, we could certainly put on our skates and go to the rink on Sundays, and we did that all the time. But now, their generation, they're so programmed with so many sports, and they take road trips and everything else. What are your thoughts, George, on that?
Was it okay to go to the club and play golf?
There you go. I would say that was a recreational sport.
Okay.
But you didn't skip church to go do that, or did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
My dad did, but that's all he's did. But I remember when I was playing hockey at Bethel back in the early 80s, Bethel wouldn't play on Sunday. And there was a big Thanksgiving tournament, I think, coming up that we were going to get invited to, and all the other schools did. And we were kind of the bad guys because we wouldn't play. That's 40 years ago. I don't know if that's changed or not. Does Northwestern College play on Sundays?
We don't. We try to avoid it.
Yeah.
If at all possible. There have been instances, and when I was at the University of Northwestern playing baseball, we did have to play on a Sunday once.
Well, you need to repent right now. So
it wasn't on the original schedule.
Right.
It was an extenuating postseason circumstance.
Yes, nothing is ever scheduled for
let's
Sunday.
Rationalize, minimize.
Well, right. Here we go back to the justifying.
But here's the deal. So we were just studying this in the Bible study. Jesus said, man is not made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath for man. So I think you kind of can use your discretion, can't you? This is our last show for me, isn't it?
Well, I think he understands man's heart, too. And he understands how we're sinful and not perfect. And I think that's what that kind of alludes to.
Okay, personal question, if you're okay. Were you okay playing in it?
In the game?
Yeah.
I was. So this goes back to when I was younger, though. When I was growing up playing travel basketball in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, all the way up through, there were tournaments that were on weekends. We played on Sundays. My devil's advocate to this whole thing, should you be going to church? Absolutely. Should God be the number one priority in your life? Absolutely. But people in the summertime, for instance, they're going to the cabin sometimes and missing church. Let's not make sports the enemy in this instance if we're saying you shouldn't be missing church to do sports if you're also missing it to do other things. I think it's a bigger issue than just throwing sports under the bus here.
Okay. And to me, I agree with you 100%, but let's double down here as it's a gambling show. When we were growing up, Billy, they had what they call blue laws on Sunday.
Yes, they did.
So if you went to like a drugstore, they had a chain down certain aisles that you couldn't buy certain products. And what I see, especially with like Roe v. Wade, when that came in 1973, there's been a slow slide here where Sunday's not different. I understand Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It used to be a grocery chain. I think it was Publix in Florida, and all their competitors were open. But you're seeing a real slide here. Like we have marijuana is legal. It's legal. People, but they're not enforcing it. Every time I go downtown Minneapolis, they're smoking pot. Mm-hmm. You can smell it. Is this part of that? With gambling is legal. So if you're a kid, can you gamble on an app, saying you're 18, and go that way? I think it's a bigger societal slide away from God and more demand to be entertained and enjoyed. That's my take.
Yeah, there definitely is that. I don't disagree with any of that, George. I think it comes down to, in that circumstance, Billy, Johnny, Susie, whoever they are, they're playing basketball, soccer, lacrosse. What is the parent's approach if they're telling them, let's say it's your sports season, let's say basketball, for instance, and let's say it takes up 3 or 4 months. For the other 8 or 9 months of the year, our rhythm is always to go to church. You're serving in church. You're attending worship with fellow believers. If you're taking that out, what are you saying as a parent in that circumstance to your child for where else you are going to get that? Because, George, you know these people. Wyatt, you know these people. Bill, I'm sure you know them as well, who may say, I'm more filled up on a Friday morning small group, or I'm more filled up on a worship night with X people on a Wednesday night. I understand what the church provides for me on a Sunday, and I agree with it, but I'm a part of the capital C church outside of Sunday. And I think it goes back to the question we're asking with all this. What is your heart posture? And can you still be seeking the Lord even if you're not in the traditional church setting on a Sunday morning? I would say yes.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a short break and be right back. It is the Unnamed Sports Talk segment. We're going to come up with a name for it, but for now, all we have is that. So let me know what you're thinking of us so far. 877-933-2484. We'll be right back. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. Welcome back. We are talking sports, and I've got George P. Fraser, Wyatt Morrell, and Ryan Mitchell, and we have started a brand new segment. We'll see how it goes. It's just so far, it's the Unnamed Sports Talk. So many people love sports, and it's a powerful way to connect to people. People often go to games together, and they invite unsaved people to games and events, and they always try to use whatever available tools they have for evangelism, and I think it's a powerful way. When you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody in the stands, it's a good opportunity to say, you should come to church with me, or what do you think about God? And lots of opportunities to talk about your faith and to create opportunities, which I think is important. So so far we've been chatting a little bit about gambling, and then we talked about the different generations. George and I grew up in a different generation where we didn't do sports on Sunday. If you did it on your own, which was great fun. And Wyatt and Ryan, they had lots of sports activities on Sundays. Now, you guys came from different parental camps. One said yes, one said no.
It's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it all goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. And if people are just joining us, it all comes to the heart posture, where you're at with that. So, growing up, we shared this off the mic. I never played travel basketball. It was always in-house, and a big reason was you didn't play on Sundays. Mm-hmm. A big reason with this is my mom, for many, many years, worked within the church, and it wasn't just going to church for us on Sundays. It's you were going to serve. You're then going to go to the church service, and you're probably going to be there for 3 hours, and it's such a priority into our rhythm as a family. We can't make it work travel-wise, getting you there, supporting you, encouraging you there. We can be invested on these other days, but we can't on Sunday. Wyatt, I'll turn it over to you. I don't fault you for playing on Sundays, and you were a much more talented athlete than I was. Not that we have to get into that, but that's another side of it, too, for what you were seeking competition-wise and for why you played on Sundays. I mean, your parents had great reasons for it, too.
Yeah, no, let's be very clear here. You're not saved off of your church attendance. You're not saved by anything that you can do. You're saved simply by the grace of God and the gift that he has given to every single one of us. So I want to be very clear about that up front. Likewise, Ryan, I don't fault your parents for their decision on this either. I think it comes down to the heart, and I know that's kind of a wishy-washy answer, and I'm not taking like a firm stance on this. But if you're playing sports on Sundays every once in a while and you're missing church, that's a different that's a whole different beast compared to missing church every single Sunday and justifying it because you just don't feel like going.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think there's a case-by-case basis here, depending on if it's affecting you in your relationship with God or if it's something that's a seasonal portion of your life that you can still connect with God in other ways outside of Sunday. Because I'll use Kirk Cousins as an example. Anybody in the NFL that's playing, they're Christians. They're not going to church on Sunday mornings. They're playing in the NFL. God is still using them in miraculous and mighty ways to reach people and other believers because of the platform he has given them. I don't look at it as a sin for Kirk Cousins to be playing football on Sunday mornings. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? What do you think God thinks about that when he views this whole subject and issue with this? Because obviously there's Christians playing on Sundays and missing church all the time, but God is still working through them and using them.
Amen.
Well, I think one of the dangers is, you don't want your kids to think of God as the great joy killer. And I'm the only one who can't play on Sunday afternoons. I think it's didn't part of the reason when the cloth was torn on the temple that you didn't have to go to the temple to access God. You can do it anywhere. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it isn't always what you do as much as who you are and why you're doing it. And I think it can be a really liberating deal. I had a good friend who played for the Vikings. You know who he is, Bill, Minnesota Vikings. And gosh, he would have speakers, and he used it to promote his ministry. It's a platform.
Right.
And we want to see winning, successful people lives-wise. I think, and the important thing is they'll say football's not as important to me as Jesus is. If I'm making $40 million a year playing quarterback from somebody, I don't know if I'd be able to say that. I would think I would be more important than anything. Heck, that's the case now, and I'm not making $40 million.
You're not making $30 million.
No. No personal stuff. I'm not going to show
let's
my
keep
text
personal
back.
stuff out of it.
But you know what I mean, Bill.
Yeah,
and
I know.
It takes a special person to handle that for the Lord because we sure see a lot of others who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
I love the example of Kirk Cousins, Wyatt. Not that we have to go on this forever, but he's been very, very blatantly open about this on a Netflix series called Quarterback that many people have seen before. If you haven't, I encourage you to watch it. Every single year of his career, going back for a number of years, he did it a few years into his career, he takes Tuesday, and he doesn't show up to the facility. He never turns on his Microsoft Service tablet to watch film. He's totally present with his family, with his kids, with his wife on a day that almost every other guy in the league is in the facility and connected and devoted to winning that game on the given Sunday or Thursday, whatever it may be. And he goes into why he does that. And a big reason why, like Wyatt mentioned, he can't go to church with his family on Sunday, but he's present for them in that space in a world and in a society, George, where you look at it and say, guess what? If you're getting paid $40 million a year to be the quarterback of this team, we own you. We own you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week because we're paying you that kind of money. And for a guy to sacrifice that, to be on the same page with his coaches and say, guess what? I'm going to give everything I got every other day of the week, but not this day. I think he's an awesome example.
I like it.
And I just think about the good that he can do with that $40 million down the road, not only for his family, but the platform that he will be able to have into the future that he can pour back into communities and relationships and foundations and things like that because he's doing this right now. He's still being a godly man in his family and in national television, like George was saying. Really, really good example.
Okay, we got time for one more topic. It's unnamed sports talk. I've got George Fraser, Wyatt Morrell, and Ryan Mitchell. Brand new segment we're having some fun with. So, all right, coaches' behavior on the field, parents and fans' behavior in the stands. Now, if a coach wants to instill character in his players, is it okay for him to scream at the ref, swear, and throw his headset on the ground?
Is it on a bad call or just?
Yeah, I suppose it's a questionable call.
When I was in Little League, there was a guy. We grew up in the same town, and you know who this is. The coach got kicked out of the game a lot. His wife would come out of the stands, and he'd sit in the car across the street, and she'd coach. And I remember you're 10, 11, and you're thinking, the guy's a lot more into this than I am. And it was funny.
Yeah.
you really lose respect for people.
Yeah, you do.
I usually think it's people that didn't play and want to have their kids do what they couldn't do, but I know that's a generalization. What do you think?
Are you talking about like parents now in the stands?
Parents,
Coaches for that matter?
Yeah, isn't that what you were going with?
Trying to live vicariously through their kid now.
Sure. I mean, it's just a game, but it puts so much more pressure on the kids, too.
So my baseball coach here at the University of Northwestern, I think he had a really good way of putting this. He would not allow us to throw our equipment. He would not allow us to swear, anything like that. But when he said, you see a professional athlete do that, or you see somebody at a high level do that, we'll go back to the $40 million that we were talking about. They are getting paid absurd amounts of money. They are expected to perform. There's a lot of pressure on them that we could not even begin to understand. Does that mean it justifies what they're doing? No. But when they have poured hours upon hours into this, blood, sweat, tears, all of that into something that they love, and they're just trying to bring a championship, let's say, to their city, and an official messes up a call, coach is going to go to war for his team because he knows how hard they have worked for this, how much it means to them. He looks at his players and says, these are my kids. I told their parents I would look after them. I would take care of them. They don't deserve to be robbed of that opportunity. Now, I'm not justifying the action, but in the heat of the moment, when you realize how much pressure they are under, you start to understand we'd probably respond in a similar way, whether we want to admit that or not.
I thought it was cool, though, when Bo Jackson would break his bat over his leg after he
really
struck
cool.
out.
Like a toothpick?
Yeah. I think, obviously, I'm a couple generations older. There used to be a Vikings football coach named Bud Grant, and he told his men, we're going to line up for the national anthem. They were the first ones to do that with their helmets in their hand. And if you get to the end zone, act like you've been there before. Just as we see a degradation of society, we see it in sports and the tantrums and the showing up the other team. I should get a lawn chair with a keep out the grass sign and yell at the little kids. But I think it's societal that the sportsmanship's gone.
Yeah.
And it's just a game. And every week there's somebody that got in a fight in the stands or I don't know.
Yeah, I only play devil's advocate because I know as a sinful person and somebody who struggles with things myself, it's easy to judge and say they shouldn't be doing that and call them out and point it out. And then I can look at myself and I go out in traffic here later today, and next thing you know, I'm honking on the horn and I'm upset because somebody cut me off and I'm not responding the way I should either. I just think when you look at it from that lens, we probably would respond in a similar way. It's not right, and it shouldn't be a good example to set for people. But when you see the pressure that they're under and the money that's being poured into these sports, you start to realize maybe where they're coming from, even if it is wrong behavior.
Well, you got to remember, I hit an umpire when I was 14 too. So
you're a hockey player.
Would you hit him in the big umpire protector?
Yeah,
that couldn't have hurt that very much.
Dad came out of the stands and did a pile driver on George. But I think it's societal too. Why show up the other team?
Yeah,
I don't remember that. Do you? Well, you're born here.
Ryan, I would be curious before we wrap up.
Yeah, I know we got to wrap. Yeah, we could go so many different directions with this, and Wyatt, you and I have talked a lot off the mic about this. I understand where a lot of them are coming from. Not to just name drop, and that's the only purpose of us doing any of this, but I look at a guy like Tony Dungy. He is upset before with the officials. He's upset with how his team's playing or how he's being treated, but there's always an opportunity to be upset and not happy about what's going on and to not lose your emotions and to lose your temper and to do it away, like you said, George, whether you're showing up the other team or you're showing up the officials, they're human too. That's a whole nother discussion on whether or not they should be getting taught full-time on how to do their job. But I think he's a great example for how to handle things in the heat of the moment and still want to win, and he did win at the highest level.
All right, I think that is wrapping up our first Unnamed Sports Talk segment. Before we go, I do want to double-check with each of the players here. Ryan, your favorite sport to watch is?
College basketball.
All right, George?
Hockey.
Hockey, Wyatt?
College football.
All right, there you go. Quite a variety. Well, let's see. I would say probably, tennis or college football.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's a good mix. I like it.
Oh, you're all wrong on that one.
Have a great night, and God bless. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.